favorite blue cat is? I do. His name is Pete the cat. And I have this wonderful new story from Kimberly and James Dean called Pete the Cat, Crayons Rock. So we're going to see how Pete gets himself into a bit of a mess. But in the book, he is being an artist. And he goes through a little bit of an artist slump, but we're going to see what gets him through. And then afterwards, we're going to create our own artwork celebrating how crayons rock. All right, let's get to it.
Pete the Cat, Crayons Rock. Look at these cool illustrations in the cover of the book. Pete loves his big box of groovy crayons. He loves to draw things like cars, trucks, flowers, and trees, and most of all, the big blue sea. From rockin' red to cool cat blue with a box of crayons, there's nothing Pete can't do. One day, Pete decided to draw something new. His friends! Using lots of colors is so much fun. Pete wanted to use everyone. He scribbled and drew a great big smile. His drawings were groovy and rockin' with style. Crayons rock! Pete was proud of the pictures he drew. He hoped his friends would dig them too. Pete showed Grumpy Toad first. Grumpy Toad said, "This doesn't look right. Those colors are way too bright." Pete thought, "Hey, no sweat, that's all right. The next one will be dynamite." Pete showed Gus his picture too. Gus asked, "Who is this supposed to be? It doesn't really look like me." Pete thought, "Hey, no sweat, that's all right. The next one will be just right." Pete finally showed Callie her picture. Callie said, "This one is fine, but it feels like something's missing from mine." Pete said, "What a mess! Bummer, I guess my drawings aren't the best." Pete started to frown. He put his crayons down. In art class, the teacher asked, "Pete, what are you going to make?" "I don't know. I'm afraid of making a mistake." Pete looked around. Gus drew the coolest superheroes, and Callie's flowers were awesome out of sight. Grumpy's motorcycle was just right. Pete's heart sank. His paper was blank. The gang looked at Pete and said, "No sweat. It's all right. It doesn't have to be just right. Your art is cool because it's you. Your art is so unique. Grab your groovy box of crayons and show us your technique." The teacher agreed. Art should be fun. Art is for everyone. From rockin' red to cool cat blue with a box of crayons, there's nothing you can't do. Pete smiled. There are no rules. It's no big deal. Art is about how it makes you feel. Pete loved his cool art. That's the one thing Pete knew. Suddenly, Pete knew exactly what to do. He tried again. Instead of drawing them one by one, Pete drew the whole gang, just having fun. "Wow, way to go, Pete. That's a rockin' masterpiece." Grumpy Toad, Gus, and Callie agreed Pete's picture was off the charts. See? That's the groovy thing about art. The best art comes from the heart. Crayons rock! Now, let's use our crayons to make some cool crayon art. All right, friends, let's grab some art supplies. You're going to need something black. You can just use a black crayon, a black ink pen, a black Sharpie, a black marker, felt tip pen. That's what I'm going to use for mine. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a rectangle. And I'm going to kind of work in the Illustrator of Pete the Cat style. I like how the lines are kind of loose and sketchy, so I am just kind of going over my lines. Everything doesn't have to be perfect. So start with a rectangle, and then I draw 2 lines on the side so I can make the box look a little bit more three-dimensional. Then I'm going to be adding some crayons coming out of the top of this box. I'm doing a still life drawing. I'm making it up in my head because I don't actually have this box of crayons sitting in front of me. But I am drawing a box of crayons as if it's sitting in front of me on the table. So I draw my first crayon, a triangular top on a cylinder body of a crayon. Start with a curvy line at the top, straight line down the side, and every line that I draw on the body of the crayon is going to be curved just a little bit because crayons are round. And then I just fill up my crayon box the best that I can. You could even make some of your triangular tips on your crayons. You could make some of them worn down, like they've been colored with a lot. My box of crayons that I just opened is pretty fresh, so my crayons, I'm going to make them look pretty fresh. They look almost like perfect triangle tips for most of them. I can fit as many crayons coming out of the top of the box as I can, and they can turn different ways. Maybe they're not sitting perfectly straight. Sometimes it's hard to get the crayons back in the box perfectly straight anyway. But I'll keep drawing until I get my box full. And you can draw any kind of design that you would like to on the box as well. So I like the design of the box that I saw in the book, but I'm going to change it up a tiny bit. So I just come in and I'll draw whatever designs I'd like. I've got a horizontal line at the top and a wavy line at the bottom. And just some little details. And whatever I do on the front, I make it match on the sides. And now I'm coming in with some block letters. The C and the O are the easiest letters to make. Now for this part, if you feel like you might not be able to fit your letters in just right, or you don't know exactly how much space it's going to take you, you might want to grab a pencil and do this part with a pencil and then trace back over it with your pen or your crayon, whatever you're using, after you feel comfortable. But sometimes, I didn't do it on this, but sometimes what I like to do is find the middle of the word and start with the middle letter. The middle of the word crayons would be the letter Y. So you could put the Y in the middle of the box and then work your way out from there. Now, I'm going to make it look like I've been using my crayons because most of the time that's the way my art studio or my art classroom looks. Things have been used. So my crayon is laying down on its side, curvy line at the top, curvy line at the bottom, now some curvy lines on the wrapper, and then that triangle tip. It's just going to be pointing a different direction. And then I add in the rest of that circle on the end. I didn't want it to show through the triangle tip of my crayon. Now I'm drawing a crayon from a different angle. I start with a circle, add 2 diagonal lines, and the top one's a little bit longer than the bottom one because I'm making it look like the crayon is pointing away from the viewer of my picture, of my artwork. So we can see the end of this crayon that doesn't have the tip. And then I'm going to draw a little bit of a smaller crayon higher up on my page. That gives my artwork a sense of space. It makes it look like this crayon is just a little bit further away. And it would be if this was an actual box of crayons with the crayons laying around. The crayons in the front, the 2 that I just drew, those will be the ones closest to me. This one will be farther away. Now I draw what's called a horizon line, and that horizon line gives my crayons and my crayon box a place to sit rather than just having crayons floating on my page. And now I'm going to add some fun colors. You can check this part out. I'm fast forwarding this part a little bit because you know how to color, I'm sure. I've got some awesome artists here, and I know that you can color really well. You can watch me color if you'd like, or you can go ahead and start coloring yourself. I am going to show you at the end how you can add some shadows. So make sure you pay attention after I get done adding all these colors. You'll be able to see how I add those shadows at the very end and make my artwork look even more three-dimensional and realistic. Alright friends, now it's time to add those shadows. So I'm just taking my black crayon and I'm going to make it look like the light's coming in from the left. So there's a shadow in the front of the crayon box and each crayon, and also on the right side of each item. So just a little black shadow, and then I'm taking the same colors that I used for each crayon and pressing down hard on the bottom of the crayons to make them look a little darker. Just on the bottom so it looks like they're round and there's a shadow underneath. Then I'm taking the gray and I'm just doing a tiny little bit of gray on the bottom of each of the white strips on those crayons. And then I'm just going over the front of the box a little bit to make it look a little bit darker on the front where the light is not quite shining. And I'm just doing a little bit of touch-ups on the crayons here. And my artwork is almost complete. After I do the touch-ups on the crayon, I always have to sign my work. Sometimes you might want to even include the date on your work. Lots of times artists will sign their names in the bottom right-hand corner of their work, so that's what you see me doing here. Have fun creating your Pete the Cat crayon box artworks.